Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for joining me for this guitar lesson. Today we're going to be talking about how to read accidentals. So, what are accidentals? Well, that's what we call sharps and flats when they're written in music. We also use this term for natural symbols, which would tell you to play it not as a sharp and a flat, but the natural note. So, when we're looking through our music, we also have a concept of key signatures. So sometimes these sharps are built into the key signature and we won't see additional symbols. And we'll talk about that in another lesson when we discuss key signatures. But in this one we're just going to talk about accidentals, which is how to deal with them when you see these symbols in front of the notes we learned how to read. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in today with example number 1. So example number 1, we have all half notes, and we're starting on G here. And then the next note here is a G sharp. So it still is on the G line, but it has a symbol in front of it. That symbol is a sharp or an accidental. So reading this accidental happens to be a sharp in this case. Okay, so we'd play the G, then we'd play the G sharp. The next measure we get A, and look, the same thing happens, right? We have an A again, but we have a sharp in front of this A. So I can just play it 1 fret higher. Okay, next we have a B. Play our open B string. And now this one is on the B line again, but there's not a sharp symbol in front of it. There's a lowercase b, right, which is the symbol we use for flat, right? So that's going to tell us to play B flat, which is going to be right here. This is the exact same note we just called A sharp a moment ago. It could also be called B flat, okay, because it's lower than B. They share a name, okay? Then we go down to A. And then A flat. This is the note we called G
sharp
earlier. It's now A flat, the same exact thing, okay? So oftentimes when we're going up, we'll write them as sharps. When we're going down, we'll write them as flats. So it's kind of a nice, easy way to do it because I see the G. Okay, still G, but a sharp. I just go up. Okay, A with a little sharp. I just go up again. B, okay, it's got a flat, so I just go down 1. Okay, I know where A is. A with a flat, I just flat it, right? So sometimes it makes sense to do it. When we get into actual keys and key signatures, that will sort of dictate too. It's like, so if you watched our episode on how to transpose the major scale, we learned about the notes that are in the key of G, and there's an F sharp in the key of G. There's not a G flat. Even though F sharp and G flat are technically the same note in the scale of G major, we can't have a G flat because then we'd have 2 types of G and 0 types of F, and that's against the rules. So we would have to call that one F sharp. Okay, so there's a few things like that to consider. It's not always about which direction we're going in, but sometimes it can be about that. So in this example, I've done it like that, where all the sharp notes are on our way up, all the flat notes are on our way down. All right, well, why don't we try that one together? Example number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great job. In example number 2, it's almost the exact same example, but I made it a bit more musical. Instead of just being this chromatic thing at the very end, I've kind of added on. So first of all, we have all the same chromatic notes up to the B, but this time I went a little further up to C, and then back down, back to G, and then this time I went a little further down. Just to make it a little bit more musical, and now you don't need to understand this right now for what we're talking about today, but this is using chromaticism. So diatonic is a word we use for scales that are in the key, and chromatic is a word we use to describe all of the different notes we have. So if we add chromaticism, that means we're borrowing other notes that are not in the key and we're adding them in. So this is an example of chromaticism that still states the C chord, actually. So the note that I'm starting on is G. Well, that's in our C chord, right in the middle of it, in the middle of the shape, that is. Okay, and then we go. Our highest note is C, so that's kind of important, and that's obviously in the C chord as well. Since it's the highest note, our ear will hear that. So the first note our ear picks up on, our highest note our ear picks up on. Then I come back chromatically. Then I keep going. Now I'm going to go through the scale from G. That was diatonically, because otherwise I would have a G flat, and then an F, and then an E. I left out the G flat. That part is just from the scale, okay? And that just helps us get to an E. E is also a note in C. So this line really states the C chord, even though it has some chromatic notes in it. Okay, so that's a little bit more of an advanced concept that we're not really digging into today, but I just wanted to mention that's kind of what's going on here, and I made this line pretty much just like the first one, but I changed it a little bit just so it sounds a little bit more like real music. Okay, well, let's go ahead and try that one together. Example number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, in example number 3, we're going to learn what it's like when accidentals stick around. Okay, so far we've thrown an accidental in front of the note and you go, oh, okay, I have to play that a fret ahead. But the weird thing about accidentals is they apply to the entire measure and only to that measure, and then they'll restart. Okay, so in example number 3, we start on an E note, and then we go to an F, but you can see we have an accidental in front of it, which is a sharp, so that means we play F sharp. So instead of playing F on the first fret, we play F sharp, which is on the second fret. Then we play G. Okay, now the last note in this measure is on the F line again, and it does not have a sharp in front of it. It's still sharp though, actually, because of the sharp that happened on the second beat of this measure. That applies to all of the Fs in this measure. Okay, so that one is still sharp. So the first measure is E, F sharp, G, back to F sharp. Okay, now in the second measure, we reset. That sharp only applied to that one measure, okay? It applies to every note in that measure, unless we put an accidental to correct it back. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it applies to every note in the measure. Once the new measure starts, it doesn't apply anymore. Okay, now, so if I look at the second measure, we have an E, and then on beat 2 we have an F with no accidental in front of it. So that's F natural again. It's reverted back to F natural. Okay, but now we have an F sharp. So I play that one, and then we get to G. Okay, now we're in the third measure, and we start with an F sharp. I had to write a sharp on that one because otherwise it would have been reverted, and we would have played a regular F there, right? So that one has a sharp. Now on the second beat, I did want a regular F, so I had to draw this symbol in there for the natural sign. So you can review our lesson on the musical alphabet, where I break down all of these signs and what they do if these are unfamiliar. We're going a little quick today and showing you how they look in music, not necessarily what they are. So if I'm going a little fast with that, no worries, just please watch the musical alphabet lesson. Okay, so then we have to write that natural symbol, and that means to play an F natural again, open E, and then I just made it a little more musical and ended it D and C. Ending on a C kind of sounds nice for this example, I think. Okay, so a couple of things there to keep in mind. Remember, if the sharp is added earlier in the measure, that note is sharp for the rest of that measure unless we add a new symbol in front of it to indicate natural, and that would revert it back to natural. Or if we started a new measure, all of the things from the previous measure, all of the accidentals no longer apply to the new measure, unless we add them in the very beginning of the piece using what we call a key signature. But like I said earlier, that's a topic for a different video. Okay, let's go ahead and try this one together, please. Example number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. So, in the next couple examples, I'd like to kind of zone in on a very important accidental, F sharp. So if you watched our lesson on how to transpose the major scale, we learned the key of G, and we learned that that one had an F sharp in it. So the key of G will always have an F sharp. So that note tends to happen a lot. And then in fact, when we get into our next keys, all of our sharp keys will have an F sharp. The key of D will have an F sharp plus a C sharp. The key of A will have an F sharp plus a C sharp and a G sharp, and so on. So F sharp is a really good one to get used to because it's going to be there for all of our sharp keys, which are the more common ones on guitar. Don't worry if you didn't quite understand that. We're going to talk about the circle of fifths and key signatures and all that stuff later on. So that's just kind of an aside to why this is important, but don't worry if that's a little too soon for you to understand that, because we're not really giving that concept the proper time today. Today we're just learning where some F sharps are on our fingerboard and how to read them into music. So we already learned about this F sharp on the second fret of the first string. Where else do we have Fs that we've learned about? So if you've watched all of our videos on how to read music for the guitar on the different strings so far, we learned a couple different places to play F. We learned there was a place to play F natural here on the third fret of D. So that means if we need an F sharp, it'll be there on the fourth fret of D. Okay, we also learned that F was here and F sharp is here on this E string, so that means that that's also true for this E string. That means that this first fret is an F and this second fret is an F sharp. Okay, so that's where our F sharps are, and why don't we just go ahead and play through this example together and just be really careful of those F sharps, okay? Okay, example number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that was example number 4. So that used a few of our F sharps, okay? In example number 5, we're going to use all of the F sharps we have here in the open position, okay? And this one, I just had a little bit of fun with it. Very simple, but also a little bit musical, and really is going to indicate the key of G major, which we're sort of in the middle of learning about here on this channel. So yeah, just a good way to practice reading your accidentals, but also this is sort of working towards just kind of getting familiar with the key of G major as well. So let's go ahead and play that together, please. Example number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can always download all these musical examples at my website, and you can play along with these as slow as you want at your own rate. Okay. Well, that's really it. That's how you read these accidentals. So the main thing to keep in mind is, first of all, what the accidentals do. The sharps, flats, the natural, know what those look like, know what they're telling you. Then you need to know your instrument. You need to know where your natural notes are, so that way if one of them has a sharp or flat in front of it, you just play one fret on either side, depending on which way the accidental has pointed you. Sharps would be one fret higher, and flats would be one fret lower, right? So knowing your fretboard is really important for this, and this is actually a really great way of helping you to learn your fretboard better as well. So the other thing to keep in mind is that when an accidental is applied to a measure, it stays applied to every note in that measure. Once we have a new measure, it resets. Okay, and that's it. That's how accidentals work for reading. Okay, well, thank you so much for watching that video about how to read accidentals. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in another lesson really soon. Thanks a lot.